The rain fell in thin, trembling lines over the cemetery, turning the ground into a mess of dark soil and scattered petals. And in the midst of that gray, shivering morning, a single dad named Ethan Miller bent down to fix the umbrella of a pregnant stranger who was silently crying beside an empty chair no one else had bothered to notice. It was supposed to be just another hard day in his already overwhelmed life, but kindness has a strange way of bending fate. And that morning, fate was watching closely. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and quiet miracles that appear when we least expect them, make sure to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Your small gesture helps more people find stories like this. Ethan wasn't supposed to be at the funeral in the first place. He barely knew the man, Mr. Harold Lancaster, an elderly neighbor who lived 3 houses away, but the old man had always waved at Ethan's 6-year-old daughter Lily as they passed his porch. Ethan felt it was only right to pay his respects. Life had been unforgiving to him lately. He had lost his job after the factory shut down, his savings were nearly gone, and Lily's medical bills for her recurring asthma attacks kept piling on the kitchen counter like silent threats. Every morning he woke up earlier and earlier, trying to stretch his dollars in ways that no reasonable person should ever have to imagine. Yet despite everything, he carried himself with a quiet strength because he wanted Lily to know that goodness still existed, even in hardship. The funeral was small, almost painfully so. Harold had no close family left that anyone knew of. A few neighbors came, a couple of distant acquaintances, and then there was the young pregnant woman standing alone at the back, trembling like she wasn't sure she belonged there. She looked exhausted, pale, and unprepared for the cold wind that whipped through the graveyard. Ethan noticed her stumbling on the uneven ground. Without thinking, he walked over, steadying her arm and holding his umbrella over both of them. She whispered a thank you, and though she tried to be strong, her breath kept hitching as if grief sat heavily on her chest. Her name was Anna Collins. She was 7 months pregnant and clutching a folded letter that her swollen hands kept trembling around. Oh. She told Ethan in a strained voice that Harold had been the only person who cared about her when her own family pushed her away after learning she was expecting. Harold had invited her for dinner when she had nowhere else to go, gave her warm soup when she was sick, and reminded her gently every week that she deserved love, even if the world made her believe otherwise. The funeral was the least she could do for him, but she had nobody to lean on, not even to help her stand steadily in the cold. Ethan felt something in his heart tighten. Maybe it was empathy, maybe it was exhaustion, maybe it was simply recognition. Pain recognizes pain, after all. Lily tugged at his sleeve, offering Anna a tiny handmade paper flower she had brought her for the lonely people. Anna took it and burst into quiet tears. Ethan crouched down, helping her breathe slowly until the wave of emotion passed. He didn't know her story, but her loneliness felt familiar in a way that hurt. After the ceremony ended and people began drifting away, Anna suddenly felt faint. Her breaths turned shallow and her free hand clutched her belly tightly. Without hesitation, Ethan helped her sit, fetched water, and kept talking to her softly until she stabilized. He didn't leave her side until she could stand safely again. She kept apologizing for being a burden, but Ethan shook his head gently. He knew what it felt like to be overwhelmed, to feel like you were always inconveniencing the world. Helping her wasn't a burden. It was simply what decent people do when life pushes someone to the edge. She eventually left in a rideshare after thanking him repeatedly, but Ethan stayed behind with Lily to pay his final respects to the old man. The cemetery employees were already preparing to leave when a sharply dressed attorney approached Ethan, asking softly if he was a Mr. Miller. Ethan nodded with confusion, assuming it was some sort of paperwork mistake. The attorney introduced himself as Mr. Graham and handed Ethan an envelope that had been left specifically for him by Mr. Lancaster. Inside was a simple note in shaky handwriting. For the man who teaches his daughter kindness in a world that desperately needs it. Thank you for looking out for the forgotten. Harold attached was a request for Ethan to follow the attorney to the office to finalize something urgent. Ethan didn't think much of it. Perhaps Harold had left him an old watch or maybe a piece of furniture. Nothing extravagant, nothing life-changing, Just a small gesture of gratitude. But when he arrived at the attorney's office an hour later with Lily curled up sleepily in his lap, his world shifted in a way he could never have prepared for. Harold Lancaster, quiet, solitary, unassuming Harold, had been a billionaire. Not publicly known, not flamboyant, but one of the original founders of a tech empire from decades ago. He never married, never had children, and most of his relatives had passed away or disappeared overseas long ago. The fortune had sat untouched, growing silently. And in his final months, Harold had rewritten his will. He left every penny, $10 billion, to Ethan Miller. The room seemed to spin. Ethan felt as if the world had paused, as if sound itself had muted. His throat tightened, and he pulled Lily closer, not understanding how life could shift from hopelessness to unimaginable abundance within the span of a single hour. He thought of the nights he skipped dinner so Lily could eat. The mornings he pretended he wasn't tired. The times he held her through coughing spells, praying for better days that never seemed to come. Now everything was changing. Not because he chased wealth, not because he sought reward, but because he led with kindness even when he had nothing left to give. Over the next weeks, Ethan didn't rush into the glamour people expected. He paid off every debt, arranged better medical care for Lily, and quietly moved into a modest new home. The rest he placed under professional management. Whoa. But his heart kept returning to the young pregnant woman he'd met at the funeral, the one who had stood alone the way he once did. He found Anna again through Harold's old address book. She was living in a shared hostel room, struggling to afford doctor visits, doing her best to stay strong. When Ethan visited, she burst into tears, not because of his wealth, she didn't know about it yet, but simply because someone remembered her. He helped her get stable housing, supported her through prenatal care, and when her baby boy was born 2 months later, Ethan and Lily visited the hospital with flowers made of bright paper, just like the one that had made her cry at the funeral. Life slowly built itself into something warmer, something fuller. Anna didn't become dependent on Ethan. Instead, she grew into her strength again, rebuilt her career, and became one of his closest friends, family even. Ethan made it a point to invest in shelters, food programs, and support groups for single parents, mothers in crisis, and people who felt unseen, just like Harold had once seen him. If this story touched your heart, please make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps more people discover these emotional stories and keeps the message of kindness alive. Before the ending, I have one special request. Comment below with one act of kindness you believe the world needs more of. And as the sun set on a life that had once been filled with fear and uncertainty, Ethan understood something deeper than wealth, deeper than luck. Sometimes the smallest kindness you offer to a stranger becomes the very miracle that saves your own life. He walked away from the hardest years of his past not just as a wealthy man, but as someone who finally understood the true legacy Harold wanted to leave behind. A reminder that compassion echoes farther than we ever imagine and often returns in ways that rewrite the entire story of who we are.